Hello, good evening. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, Father Teddy.
Hey, how you guys all doing? It's good to see you. So we're getting together tonight because we wanted to hear how you are experiencing church in all your unique ways at home. We've been experiencing it in some unique ways here. And one of the ways that we've been doing it are these televised masses. And I know for myself, it hasn't really been cutting it. I'm glad to be able to have some contact with everyone, but for myself, I've come to realize the importance of having everyone together when we pray, when we celebrate Eucharist. So it's all right, but I'm finding that it's making me even more anxious to be back together as a family to celebrate around the table. One of the things I know I've spoken about with other pastors, priest friends of mine, have been how much more aware we've become of Eucharist as meal, that we come together and we're formed and shaped by community through our participation in this sacred banquet. It's also made us aware of there are different ways of being sacramental. Second Vatican Council spoke about the domestic church, the church that's formed in your own families, in your own homes. And we have so many different kinds of families and so many different kinds of homes. We wanted to give an opportunity for people to talk about how they're experiencing church right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lydia, who is going to be able to talk to us about the mechanics of how it'll work tonight. Okay, Lydia?
Hi, can everybody hear me? Yes, okay. Welcome. This is our first parish-wide Zoom conversation, hopefully not the last. Thanks for taking the time to be here tonight. Like Father Phil said, we really want to hear what your reality is like right now and hopefully answer some questions among ourselves that we may have. I'm sure we all have a few of these Zoom calls under our belts right now, but I'll remind you, if you could keep yourself muted, feel free to use the chat function. We are recording this Zoom for people who aren't able to join us tonight, so just be aware of that. And yeah, welcome and let's do this.
Oh, hey, Drew. So I'm really happy to welcome you all as well. Griffin and I are just the facilitators for this evening, but we wanted to have a conversation, as Lydia and Phil have said, to give us a chance to ask some questions and really just kind of ruminate together on what does it mean to be church now in the middle of this pandemic? What does it mean to be church as we walk out of this time? The idea for this conversation was born from a comment that somebody made a few weeks into being at home when they said, well, I think that if I'm watching Mass on TV or on my computer and I've got bread and wine on my table, my desk in front of me, isn't that the same thing as what Father Kelly is doing? And every instinct in my body that was a teacher went, sort of similar, and I explained what an agape meal was, but it's not sacramental. And I thought we really kind of need to help each other understand there are different ways that we come together as church. A lot of us are struggling with just the computer screen, and some people like having coffee when they're going to Mass on Sunday morning in their PJs, and others are really missing being with others in the building. So we were wondering, what's your experience been watching Mass on TV or on a screen? How has that been for you? What does it mean for us now when we're away from each other to celebrate the Eucharist virtually together? What does presence mean now? You know, as Catholics, we talk a lot about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. What does that mean when we're sitting on the other side of a computer screen? And then a lot of us are wondering, what happens when we're able to come back into church? How are we going to do that? And one of my favorite questions, a lot of you guys sent in your questions ahead of time. One of my favorite questions is, how is this going to change us, both as a church, this time of pandemic? How is that going to change us as a church and as people? How are we going to, what are we learning about? What does it mean to live together? So the last thing I want to say at this point is, when I was a freshman in college, I had to take a mandatory philosophy class, and I hated all of the questions. It's a mark to me now of how much more, well, not wiser, but how much older I've gotten, that I'm way more comfortable with the questions. So what I'm hoping for tonight is that we have lots of questions and lots of conversation. I don't know how many answers we have, but I'm okay with that, and I hope you are too. So the floor is open. I don't know how that happens, if we're going to raise our hands or Lydia's going to unmute everybody, but what are you thinking about?
I'm just very appreciative that I can see Mass, find some way to see Mass, and it's nice. So, it's been tough, obviously, but, we're making the best of it. So, I don't know, I'm very appreciative to see Father Kelly in the morning, on Sunday mornings, for sure.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree. It's so great to see, a familiar face on the screen, right? To see Father Kelly saying Mass, and to kind of see all the chat and stuff. Like, like obviously we want to be together in person, but we want to keep everyone safe and healthy and keep the city safe and healthy. And the fact that we can do it like this, I feel like we're showing our love for each other by keeping each other healthy as well.
And his homilies have been great. The technology, we understand to work one day and not the next. That's just fine. Who cares? We're here together.
I think that the choice that that the staff made at St. Francis of broadcasting, instead of saying, you can watch Mass, you can watch the Cardinal. Donna was saying one day that she's suggesting to people to check out all kinds of Masses, and that's a good idea. But one of the things that we needed, I think, was our home, our church home, and that you went to the trouble to have our Mass, which is always Father Kelly or Father Tony, was so important in so many ways. It's not the same thing. I really appreciate that it went into the dining room from church, even though I love the church, but the sound was not as good, and it certainly was not as well. I don't want to say intimate, considering I'm usually doing this in my pajamas, but you could have just sent us to another Mass, and we would, we may have done that. We would have done that maybe, but that we have access to this one is really good. It is not the same thing, though. I can't wait to be with everybody.
I think, Jane, what I find missing is I feel like part of the great energy we get is the circle of feedback that goes from us to Father Kelly and from Father Kelly to us during the Mass. And just like I said last night, I didn't know there was like a whole chat going on the channel. So at least now that'll give some feedback to it. But I feel like part of what makes our community so exciting and so vibrant on Sundays is that feedback loop that we have. And I feel like sometimes I try and look and think what Father Kelly's thinking, and how energized he's feeling just from none of us being there. So I'm a little worried about you, Father Kelly, to be honest. I want to make sure you get some feedback from people soon.
We haven't had a chance to call us out for being too quiet in a while, but I've been thinking about it, so we're doing it in our heads. And for me, the point that it really hit home was at Easter, having that was, just enough weeks in that it was a kind of a pivotal point, that what quarantine meant for all of us. And like, that was a really actually spiritual time, even though it wasn't in the in-person Eucharist. Like, it felt like the community, church is a community as opposed to a set of rules and sacraments, was also really obvious to me at that point. Big shout out for the update to the website where you log on and you see everybody's faces. that's new and it looks great. And so, yeah, one of the things I really liked is the online community forces you to like honestly see and have a name associated with the face, that in a way that's kind of hard to do when you just like know the person that's 3 pews up every Wednesday. But you know, the excuse that the technology is forcing us to like learn each other's names, I think is actually kind of a great one.
I just have to pop in on that because Erin's mom has been coming to church, and about 2 weeks ago, she typed in the chat function, "Anybody see my daughter? I'm looking for my daughter Erin." And I laughed because I know where Erin sits in church, and I recognize the last name, so I could say, "Oh, she's over there on the left with her cup of coffee."
She thinks she's so funny. It was a good
She
one.
is so funny.
We miss church and we miss classes.
You do? I'm really glad. I'm sorry that you miss church and miss classes, but it makes me very happy that you do.
Because church is important. Yes.
Somebody's been doing their homework. Very good.
I think that this is an opportunity for us to like reflect and rethink why we go to church and why church is important for us. It's a bit of a reset point that I think it, or at least it can be that for us. I think it's potentially even very good for us to kind of have this forced time off. And I'm really looking forward to returning to church and to see like an obnoxious and outrageous number of people together. But I don't think I would have felt like that if this hadn't happened. And I think it's a moment that we can all use to realize how important that is.
I agree, Alfonso. I have to say the thing that amazes me most is, and thrills me, just like the kid said, that people are missing the Eucharist, and that every parent I talk to says they're really cherishing the time home with their family. I know it's a horrible thing that we're in the midst of a pandemic, but those are two really huge blessings, I think.
Something that I've been thinking about is kind of like when things do reopen, like how will it be? Like, will it be safe? I guess I've been thinking about that at all. Like, I've really, really wanted to take the Eucharist and to participate in that sacrament, and part of me gets worried, like, could I be, if I take part in that and it's not like, could it be spreading disease? Like, I don't want to be responsible for, spreading something to anyone, and trying to do something good, doing something, that's harmful. And that's something that I've just kind of been a little bit worried about after reading certain things.
I agree, Lacey. I think a lot of us are concerned about how we're gonna open safely. One of the things Father Kelly and I talk about is that we won't do anything until we get explicit directives from the archdiocese, who will get them from the government. So we figure we're going to be pretty safe however we do this. There'll have been 2 layers of precaution built in.
I like the idea that Newark is opening first. And,
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. I like the idea that Newark is opening first, and that we'll be able to see the way that they're doing it, and what works, and God forbid what it doesn't work so well. So I love that. I like that idea that someplace that's close to us and has a lot of similarities is going to pioneer in this.
Please, Donna. Lydia, can you unmute Donna? Or Donna, unmute Donna?
Yep.
Oh, good.
I think, yeah. So actually in Newark, we worked about 3 weeks on reopening guidelines for parishes. Matter of fact, I'm in charge of the committee that's doing that, and I have about 9 pastors on that committee. And so we researched what other dioceses were doing around the country to come up with our list of guidelines. So they're pretty complete. And at the same time, you know, people have, some of the pastors have suggested a few things. So we're meeting again tomorrow. And we've also come out with two of the priests wrote up FAQ sheets that would be helpful for the parishes. But it's pretty strict. You know, we gave a kind of a large number. We said no more than 50%. Patterson just said 25%. At the same time, the governor and Cuomo did the same thing today, said 10 people in church for now in phase 1. We're in 3 phases. But, you know, we're hoping it works. One parish on Sunday for the opening had 280 people came to the church during the day, and other parishes maybe 10 or 4, something like that.
Something that I have also been thinking about is how much the music is such a wonderful part of our services. And that's in particular something that we know from a public health perspective, like there's a lot of precautions around. So, you know, for us, I think it's it's a reality that makes me very sad thinking about not being able to have that part of our mass, probably in the same way for a while, but you know, we've got great music ministries and I'm confident they'll come up with a great idea of how we can do it safely. But like, I'm kind of bracing myself for that piece that I'm like super excited for being a little further out.
We were talking about that yesterday and I said, well, maybe if we can't sing along, maybe we're going to start moving.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we'll feel it a different way. We'll express it a different way when we're together.
You know, Catholics are not known for singing along. You know, we think of that as a Protestant thing to do, you know, or whatever. So maybe this will, you know, make all 10 people or 25% or 50%, whatever's in the seats, maybe this will make everybody sing. I think Dylan will make everybody sing.
When it's safe to do so.
When it is safe to do so, yes.
So one question that I have is like about communion and both in the bread and the wine. Are those like, is there any specific thought about that, like reopening with just the bread like we were doing before the lockdown, or in any other way?
Yeah, I think it's going to be we won't be seeing communion under both species for quite some time. So when we say both species, both the bread and the wine, the precious blood, because I think there's just such a risk of contagion there that it's just not practical. And I'd ask Sister Donna, what are they doing? How are they proposing to give out the host in Jersey? What are the protocols for that?
Lydia, Donna. Donna.
Father Kelly, right now the protocols are that for the Eucharist, which would be in phase 3, which would be Sunday Mass, would be to give out the bread, not, it's all technical, but not dropping the bread into somebody's hand, but trying not to touch somebody's hand while you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big controversy in the country over gloves, no gloves. So we have yet to settle that. Right now, we're saying no gloves, but that everybody's hands are sanitized beforehand. There's no reception of the Eucharist on the tongue. It's only by hand without touching. If there is that, there's they can sanitize their hands or whatever. But there could be Eucharistic ministers as well as, you know, the priest giving out communion. But again, everybody's got to be kind of retrained, etc. And when people come forth for communion, they need to keep the 6-foot distancing, probably have to tape the floor, all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of, I could send it to you.
That'd be great.
I'll
Thank
send you what we're working on. So,
But to go, Alfonso, to go back to your question, it's traditional Catholic theology teaches that Jesus is completely present under both species, under the bread and the wine. What happened as a result of the Second Vatican Council was that they really stressed Eucharist as meal, a sacred meal, and that they wanted people to participate to the full extent that they could. So under both bread, the sign of both bread and wine, which really gives that great sense of us being at a meal, at this Passover celebration with Jesus. So I think this is going to be one of the unfortunate consequences of what has happened as a result of this. But again, I think everyone wants to be as absolutely safe as possible in terms of health concerns.
Donna, Phil, just to clarify, Lisa asked what phase 3 is. We're talking about the phases that the government is putting in place, right?
Actually, Jane, I want to know when it is, like how far
when?
out is phase 3? Because
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, we have no whens. Right now, we just started on Sunday with a phase 1. So until the civic authorities also kind of open up some things, we're not moving into phase 2. So phase 2 would then be some daily masses. Right now, we have no masses except live streamed. And then phase 2 would open with some of the weekday masses, and then phase 3 would be, back to sort of normal. But we don't know when that is. I mean, it could be end of June for all we know. We don't know.
Thanks. Is there have they thought about, I mean, I don't, this is absolute ignorance I'm asking it. Would we have mass with just symbolic bread and wine on the altar only? And I mean, if we want to be back together, could we just do it for Father Kelly and the altar boys and the deacons on the altar as opposed to everyone in the church?
I personally speaking, I'd have a problem because, I mean, one of the things I've struggled with these past several months has been not having you there. Obviously, there's one other person there, the person who's kind of filming me. We maintain 6 feet apart, scrupulous washing of hands and masks and all that stuff. But, it's overly orchestrated. And I understand, and I certainly believe in the efficacy of the Eucharist. Jesus is present there. But I think that having this meal and not having the community together and able to participate in it, I think there's I know there's a poverty for me in this, a spiritual poverty in this for me. So it almost seems anathema for me to think that I'd have food at the table and I couldn't invite you up. One of the things I've been reading is this sense of how we've entered more deeply into the mystery of how Christ is present at that table, and how in a real way, I mean, I've always believed it and taught it, but now I feel it, that we're all celebrants in a real sense when we come together to celebrate Eucharist. So yeah, I don't think there's any easy answer to that one.
But Father Kelly, there's like mass is, will have to be at a certain stage in terms of the city pandemic levels, but there's perhaps things we could gather for, like small prayer groups leading up to then. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, and I think, as long as we can maintain a level of, given the best thinking that's out there, a level of safety for everybody. I mean, this is one of the things I was talking to a friend of mine who's a pastor on the West Side. I want to make sure that they have regular testing for us available, because we could conceivably become vectors to pass the virus on to other people. And someone was talking about that before. That would kill me to think that I was the cause of someone getting virus, So
I think there are a lot of questions we haven't even thought about. I know as much as I want everybody back, I want everybody back so that I know that it's safe, so that we can be in the space in a good and a healthy way, spiritually, emotionally, physically, you know.
This might be a weird question, and it might just be something I missed in religious ed, but I'm really just kind of curious. In terms of the wine, is there a reason why it can't be poured into like individual cups? Just because it seems to me like that would be really safe, but I was wondering if there was like a religious reason why that couldn't be the answer.
Technically, off the top of my head, I don't see where that would necessarily. I think logistically, in a Catholic mass where we usually have so many people, logistically it would pose a problem. But I don't think, you know, if you're consecrating a solid, no pun intended, mass of wine there, and then it was distributed to individual cups, as long as the protocols were observed, I think I can't see that being a problem. But I'm not a scientist. I just play one on television. Okay, so I don't know.
I wonder if anyone else is aware that this is Laudato Si week. Anybody heard of that? You know, that's it's 5 years.
Anybody who's
5
looking
years
at
since
Jeannie, we've been putting stuff up on Facebook all week. I hope people are paying attention.
Yeah. We just, I mean, this is, you know, thinking about the Catholic Church and its, the Pope's letter about the environment. Very important issue, you know, of course, for us as Catholics to be supporting this and to be getting more and more information. But there are webinars going on all week. So if you want to just go into your whatever your what do they call browsers? I go into Google and say Laudato Si, and you'll get it up. And then it's something you can do while you're home. You can be learning some more about what's going on with regard to us thinking about the environment and what our responsibility is in that regard.
As a matter of fact, I think, Griffin, you guys at Commonweal have a webinar tomorrow for Laudato Si, correct? We have
tomorrow. I think it's next Tuesday.
What's that?
I think it's next Tuesday.
Oh, okay, it's coming up.
Yeah. Wait, no. Maybe it is tomorrow. No, you're right. It's tomorrow. You're right. That's another thing, Tuesday. Yeah, you're right.
So yeah, we can support Griffin and our friends at Commonweal. Or our webpage is on our online calendar.
So unmute yourself, Kristen. There you go.
Yeah. I just have to second what Ginny said about making use of this time when we can't be together to avail ourselves of some of the fabulous, some of them are Zoom meetings, some of them are much more orchestrated programs. Griffin, I caught the one on, it was really interesting, the one on Jackie Robinson as a Christ figure in breaking the baseball sports barrier. And Ginny, Pat Latona, Kathleen and I have been participating, again, virtually, in programs run by about 8 groups that are coalescing that we're going to meet in person in April, and now it's online. And at a time when I personally am so disheartened by so much that is going on civically and politically in the country, it is so heartening to sit in on these sessions. The last 2 Saturdays were sessions of young people up into their mid-20s, 30s, all over the world. And they're so well organized that at 9 a.m. in the morning, we could fit in the Japanese youth, European, and it was all about the environment, climate change. And rather than feel hopeless, I think one of the things this COVID pandemic has shown, when you look at the aerial views of almost any major city, is that the air is better. People who have allergies are saying they can breathe. So rather than feel climate change is an issue that is irremediable, irreversible, you're never going to be able to fight the big corporations, just treat yourself to a dose of optimism. And just as I think Ginny just said, go on Google and search Laudato Si, learn how to spell it first. You can get that from, you'll find dozens of programs, but there are also dozens of secular programs dealing with the one issue of the environment. And so I've gone on long enough, but we can either feel terrible and yearn for a time we can be together, and that's allowable, or we can really treat this as a rich time. Somebody mentioned prayer groups. There are prayer groups that meet on Wednesday at 2, where you can spend a whole hour analyzing the readings and hear what people are thinking. And then Jane leads something at noon. We can do a lot virtually. And I think before we know it, we're going to be back in our regular routines of running around and not being able to fit everything in. So I think we should exploit this time if we can. And we have so many resources here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Kristen, thank you so much. You gave me the lead-in I wanted for that Wednesday afternoon prayer. I don't know about all of you guys. Some of you are home with your kids. Some of you are home working. I am amazed that I still don't have enough time in a day to do the things I thought I wanted to do. And I'm guessing that house cleaning is never going to be on the top of my list. But I always think I should have more time for prayer. And this time now, when we're rethinking how we are church together, is forcing me to look for ways and opportunities to pray. I know the Spanish, and be more consistent about that. The Spanish community comes together every night at 6 o'clock to pray the rosary together. So Kristen and Wendy and a few other folks join with Donna and I on Wednesday afternoons at 2 o'clock to do an hour's worth of faith sharing together on the upcoming readings for scripture. Some of you guys know we have done small Christian communities in the parish. This is a perfect time, and Zoom really is a perfect vehicle for doing some of that stuff. We can set up more of those groups if we want them for ourselves in times that are convenient for people who are working during the day. Monday night RCIA group with Chrissy and Alice are still going strong. Every Monday night they're there. So we are open to creating more consistency for each of us in our prayer lives if that's something that we want.
Getting back to Laudato Si, I'd be interested to have people been aware of not only the physical environment, but in terms of the Pope in the letter writes about the interconnectedness of us all. The environment as well as our social circles. In New York, the disproportionate amount of cases and deaths have been heavily weighted in the Black and the Latino community. What should the church's response be to this? How should we get this out to the front? Will there be changes, and can the church continue to be a prophetic voice in leading the way? What do you think?
Father Kelly, the church certainly can be a voice for those people. And it's unfortunate that people in higher government think that it's so safe to go out and about and start, doing what we did before, which is utterly ridiculous. And coming from someone that suffered through the symptoms of this virus, it's a terrible thing. And especially someone who has the underlying ailments or they have any type of pre-existing conditions, it's a terrible, terrible thing. I think as a church, as a community, we have to really emphasize to people that it is still very, very dangerous. We have to, you know, and we cannot put each other at risk. And as much as we want to go back to church and be in a community together, you know, it's scary. It's really scary, especially for someone who's been through this. We have to be careful. We really do. Because, and these communities, people are just dismissing these communities. People don't realize, you know, how affected these communities are. And I don't know what we can do necessarily as a church and as a community to get the word out more. I would love to be able to, and, you know, do something, but people are dying every day, and it's, you know, and it's not really spoken about, and it's really disturbing.
Yeah, and when we look at who really has been the backbone in so many ways, keeping the city moving, the hospitals, the delivery people, the sanitation, the people working in supermarkets, you know, so many of them are persons of color, people from the socioeconomic end of the spectrum that are not the people who help form and shape policy. You know, that we don't have a better healthcare system where people are covered and can get tested regularly and can receive. It's a disgrace. And I don't hear this as something that's being pressed, I don't think, half as much as it should in terms of the national and the local discussion. And, you know, can the church be a prophetic voice in that?
Yeah, can I just...
One thing, oh, sorry. Lisa, did you want to go?
No, you go ahead, Mary.
I have been seeing an enormous amount, not only of sickness, but also significant anxiety and mental health issues. I think going forward, we need to make sure that all of us heal mentally, physically, and spiritually. I just think it's been so difficult. I talked to this one woman who had COVID and just this horrible experience and such anxiety and being hospitalized, and now is better, but still isn't really the way she needs to be. And it's just so hard, and the families don't have any money. You know, another woman today, people she knew died, and then she's very afraid. Her husband isn't working. There's no money in the household. So it's just, we need to really work to help with the mental health issue and the anxiety and bring joy back into our lives. I know, back to Laudato Si, I love the park and the beauty that we do have in the city. And this is spring migration. And so there's a lot out there, but I do think we need to focus on that as a church and make sure that we are healed from this pandemic.
Thanks, Mary. Somebody else was...
Lisa wanted to speak.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to chime in briefly on the issue around the church and the health inequities. I mean, and Father Kelly's reference to healthcare and testing. I mean, one of the things that obviously that this COVID crisis has really made apparent is the extent to which the lack of health coverage comprehensively in the US contributes to all of the underlying conditions that are not treated, whether that's hypertension or, you know, all of these associated underlying conditions that amongst working class and brown and Black people in the States are not cared for initially. And then, as Father Kelly said, they're the very workers then who are out there getting exposed. And I think the extent to which the church can speak about those life and health issues more and more, and not, you know, as some wings focused on particular life phases, and I think don't look at the whole spectrum of life as as part of, Catholic teaching, I think is really paramount, for the wealthiest country in the world, to have people who can't, who don't want to get tested because they know maybe they can't access the healthcare or whatever, or because they're afraid of their immigration status, is devastating, because it's obviously cost many people their lives, and is going to continue to do so. And the church has a huge, has a big voice to play, but it needs to magnify those pieces of the life issue more.
Thanks, Lisa.
Father Kelly, I'd also be interested in your, a follow-up question is I guess when we talk about the church and the institution, I think about what we can do in very different lenses on the local level, like our community, versus the church's power as a broader institution, like in America at the world stage. And so, if we're talking about what we can, St. Francis can do in the community, I think there's such a powerful role that St. Francis can play in listening and having standing meetings with community members that are leading and really can speak and tell us what they need on this, to equip this. I can't underscore what Lisa said enough. How do we stop this cycle from happening again? All of the underlying needs that aren't being addressed right now, like newborns, babies, doctor's appointments, and things like that. How do we help people get connected to this, to what is affordable for them? All of those matter tremendously. I have probably many shared feelings across the group about what the broader church as an institution can be doing in terms of being more vocal about what it really means to be an institution of Catholic social teaching, and pushing more assertively for addressing the inequities that exist. I guess that's probably not on all of our individual plates, but I don't know, that's really something that I have a lot of faith and confidence that our local church can and will listen and do a lot. But broader, I guess I don't know, I'm a little less optimistic.
We're in discussion right now with, we were, as many of you know, we were given the Cabrini grant through the Cabrini Foundation, and it was a consortium of Brick Church on Park Avenue, Church of Living Hope on 104th Street, and ourselves. And we had a number of projects that money was slated for. It's all kind of been put to the side because we can't meet. So presently we're working at just that, talking about how we can redirect that money to our neighbors in East Harlem who are most in need, especially people that would not benefit from the economic stimulus program and all sorts of things. And more our awareness is, trying to get the money directly in people's hands because they know the best thing to do with it. So, one of the things I know, Lydia, we've discussed as we're talking to our folks, is that things that we'd never think about. Certainly food is primary. Rent right up there also, but cell phone. If you don't have a cell phone right now, how do you stay connected to the outside world? And people's bills are becoming due, all sorts of things. So there are practicalities that we may have not even thought of, but that we can actively be part of the solution. And moving forward, as we all know, this is not going to be like one day, oh, everybody can go back and things are going to be all right. This is for the long haul. And can we work with and in the community to help create structures that will allow people to regain their lives back? All sorts of functions that the church could be an agent in terms of change. One of the things we're doing right now is we're working with local merchants up in East Harlem, so that we can keep local restaurants and food businesses in business, so there's something to come back to, and people can still continue to buy locally and have a real say in the way they do business. The changes that are going to be wrought by this are enormous. And as always, the people that are going to suffer the most will be the people at the bottom of the economic ladder. So I think, going back to what you're saying, Aaron, we have a moral obligation to make sure that we're there walking with our neighbors at this point. So.
I have a question.
Quickly, that's a little pitch. If you know people that have any background in credit unions, in small businesses,
And Baba.
stuff, you know, we're looking right now to continue to build on the coalition and the friendships we've made amongst a number of organizations in East Harlem. So
I understand that this kind of conversation has gone on before my presence here, because it's the first time that I've been with you. Is that true? That you meet once a week, or?
Cabrini, Kathleen?
No, not Cabrini. This group that's meeting tonight, us, the
This
church,
is the first time.
the church people from St. Francis.
This
Is
is
this
the
regular?
This is the first time, Kathleen, that we're meeting as such a large group. That is a question we have on the table. Do we want to make this a more regular gathering so that we have?
Well, maybe I'm suggesting that it seems to be a good idea, because it's a way of our building a sense of community and how we are responding both to the virus itself, and how do we respond to that? We're a local group. I think we have to, we think globally, but about the world, but we only can act locally. And I think that's already surfaced in the conversation today. Yep. If we do meet, I would suggest if there was a way to begin, that we would all have a chance to say something. So there might be a common question. It might be, how did you feel? What happened to you related to the virus in the past time since we've met? You know, something like that. And I'm concerned about, there's going to be a lot of changes, and well, everybody knows that. But I'd like to see us think about transformative changes. I mean, we have to look at, like what Father Kelly said, is that the huge gap between the rich and the poor. Now, that's a broad statement, but it's everywhere. But we see that. So how do we think about dealing with that? And maybe only on the local level, but we're thinking globally. We need to think about capitalism. I guess when we talk about the rich and the poor, we have to look at what capitalism is doing to us. I think the patriarchic system is something we should be looking at, and you could name others, but it's like just surfacing a sense of who we are together in community, so that we can work together as community in. I guess I just think of it now, how enriching that would be, and it's very exciting. The other question I would say is, what are we learning from the virus? Because there's some good things in it. There's some maybe the word is enrichments. Our spiritual life is being nourished in some way by our experiences that we're going through ourselves and what we see in others. So that would be just what I would say.
Kathleen, thank you. And I really appreciated the question. I know you had put it in ahead of time. What are we learning? How is this enriching us? I'm noticing that a lot of people have scheduled an hour for this and are getting ready, have popped off or need to leave. So, but I also appreciate that before we sign off, I wanted to make sure to give the folks who didn't have a chance to say anything, I know the introverts wait and take things in. If anybody wants to add anything to the conversation, now would be the time. My question would be, do we think it's worth calling this group or a group together again in maybe 2 weeks? And we can certainly do some of the common questions and give people a chance to pop in. Thank you, Tim. I see your little thumbs up. If people are open to meeting again, I would suggest 2 weeks from now, 2 Wednesdays from now, if that fits everybody's schedule. Can we? Cool. We'll set that up. Thank you. And is there anybody who was quiet. Lydia, maybe you can unleash the microphones if anybody wants to say anything before we take off.
Matt did.
Matt.
Yes. So real quickly, I just want to throw this idea out there, potentially going back to Father Kelly's idea of how we could be advocates for the community. Is there any way we could maybe bring some of those workshops or those programs that the social justice ministry did, like the housing fair or any of the immigration workshops? Can we bring that to an online setting and just have either topics like talking about the current laws and the current phases, or just healthcare information of what's going on, because there's so much conflicting data and so much information out there. Is there a way to maybe centralize some of that material and information and get that out in an online forum, similar to how the social justice ministry has set up previous programs?
I think it's a really good suggestion. One of the things that we were set to do back in March, we were very excited about, as part of the Cabrini grant, we had partnered with a group called Qualitas, who work specifically with Spanish-speaking lower-income folks to give them financial literacy. So everything from, if you are undocumented and you fear, that you may be repatriated, you may be sent back to your country of origin, how do you protect your children? How do you protect whatever assets you have here? Very practical things. If you're looking to just try to save money to get out of a hole, how do you budget? How do you do all sorts of things? Ways to get people out of poverty and stabilize them. So that was something that we were going to do in March with them. That'd be something, Lydia, I think they may be game for doing online. I think a number of people in our Spanish-speaking community have used this time as an opportunity to become more computer literate. So I think more people are beginning to understand how to work this thing. And once they understand, maybe they can teach me, because I still don't know how to do most of this. But I think that's an excellent idea.
Hi, would it be helpful from a mental health point of view to have, I don't know, a psychiatrist? Would it be helpful to have like a Q&A or some sort of like, obviously not treatment based, but more informational based about, COVID and mental health and the role of trauma right now, especially from being in shelter in place. I don't know if that would be something that would be helpful. Maybe like a talk. I don't know.
I'm sure that would be helpful. Yeah.
And it could be something English and Spanish or bilingual, so that could be more
true. We actually have a really good resource in the parish who is bilingual, who's been working his tail off these days. I know our mental health professionals are incredibly busy, but we can certainly see if we can put something on the calendar.
And just to let everybody know, if you could distribute it amongst your social networks, Lydia and so many people have put together an absolutely fantastic list of agencies and help available that we have listed
on the website,
our parish page. Everything from food to domestic violence to counseling and it's all bilingual. So if you find someone or you know someone who is having difficulty in some area, there's most likely a connection that they can find on the page to find some help. And if not, reach out to us directly.
Oh, Mary, I think I saw your hand up. I saw somebody's hand up.
I would, following up the one on Kathleen, you threw out a number of subjects, and every single one of them has piqued my interest. We have put up a number of things over the past several weeks, and it's no surprise our good Pope Francis has been leading the way in terms of speaking about, is there another way that we can do this in terms of the global economy? This is a time for us to think creatively. As you mentioned, Kathleen, out of this comes some opportunities. A universal basic wage. Are there things that we can begin to talk about to keep not only people out of poverty, but keep economies from completely being decimated because there's no safety net for folks. This might be the time when even diehard capitalists may want to get on board and start to talk about there's a better way to do things. You know, we see the United States in some camps retreating from global initiatives. I think if we looked at what happened with Ebola, the United States was a leader under President Obama in squashing that pandemic by going in and bringing the best that we had to bring in terms of scientific knowledge and know-how. This would be especially unwise for us as a country to draw back from the global stage at this point and not seek solidarity with people. How do we translate that into a Catholic vote? How do we get people aware of the fact that we need to not be retreating, but entering more into dialogue with folks? The other issue that came up, Catherine, you mentioned, was patriarchy. I think the interesting thing that will come out of this, as we have come to rely more and more in some ways, and I don't think it's an either or, I think it's a both end. We can continue to hunger for the Eucharist, and we need to come together as a community, young and old, black and white, Spanish and English speaking, poor and rich, everybody in between. That's what makes this community. But we also come to see us exercise those roles of chief prayer and celebrant in your own homes, in your own domestic church. And how is that going to change us for the better? I think it's, you know, I've noticed some of my brother priests running around the streets with monstrances and all sorts of things. And, you know, I think that has value for people. But for me, I know the real hunger has been the inability to come together and share the common meal of Eucharist with everyone and break open the word. I think, Erin, you were saying, or someone was saying earlier, this must be difficult for you. To celebrate a Mass and not look at and see people celebrating with you has been awful, absolutely awful. It's made me more aware of we need one another. And imagine a radically different and changed ministerial setup that this might be able to teach us in terms of how we come through this and out of this. So I think these are all great topics to discuss and to see what we can discern together.
Could I add something?
Absolutely.
I miss the children at Mass. I miss the children at talking or whatever they're doing. I miss that at Mass, and I'm glad to see Drew has his child there. And maybe to end on what gives us joy. Where was the last time we had joy, or where was it a sense that we were, because that's what we are supposed to have, joy as we go along in this.
I agree, Kathleen. Thank you. Before we end with prayer, last licks, does anybody have anything to say or add to our awesome conversation?
I just wanted to say one quick thing in terms of the institutional church, what Erin was talking about. I guess everybody gets mailings, emailings or whatever from the Archdiocese as well, just telling us what's going on. And every time I get one, I write back to them to say, this is wonderful. And usually it is. I mean, they're telling us something nice. This is wonderful. I want you to know that what I'm really concerned about are the marginalized, are the poor, are, you know, whatever. Because I think that it's important for the Archdiocese to know that a whole lot of us believe that this is the priority of the church. I think that would be very helpful, because I think the people that they're hearing from most often, maybe, I don't know, it's a leap, but maybe the people they're hearing from are the ones who are concerned about things that are not involved with the marginalized or the poor or whatever. And so I take the opportunity when they write to me to write back and say, you know, that's all fine and good, but what are we doing about the poor?
I'm sure the Archdiocese is always happy to get a letter from you, Alice.
Yeah, sure.
It's a good point, and I think that, yeah, you know, one of the things we have been doing a great deal of has been posting what Catholic Charities have been doing, and I think they have been exemplary. Having said that, I know a number of people took issue at the recent phone call between the bishops and the president, and there were a number of difficulties that people had, and I think those have to be spoken about in an honest way within the church to bring us, because it's not a suggestion, it is an absolute demand of the gospel that the poor take preferential treatment.
I would also like try to go local in the opposite direction, and one thing that I believe is that when we have 30 people here, 40 people, 100 people, we are able to reach much further and to have more ideas than when there's 2 or 3 people or 1 person involved in the decision making. So, I mean, I just want to pitch that there. Each one of us knows people, might come up with ideas, might have like a insight for something that the church globally or the church here can do. So I would say just not wait for someone else to have the same idea.
Thanks, Alfonso. Ginny, we need to unmute Ginny. She had her hand up.
She can unmute herself. Ginny, unmute.
Ginny, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
I wrote a letter to the Cardinal, just sent it 2 days ago. And I'd be very happy to share it in some way, maybe just send it to Lydia and she can spread it out however she'd like. But I think, and it was in regard to of his phone call and his best friend, Donald Trump. I just think, I mean, for me, it was a great problem off my chest when I finished this letter and did it. And so maybe more people just need to do those things. So I'm going to send it to Lydia tomorrow, and she can send it wherever she'd like. Because I think I don't think the Cardinal's going to read it, but that's fine.
Great suggestion. Journaling is actually a really purple, wonderful solution. It was a good reminder.
Good.
Hold on. I see that one person has their hand raised. Julie, do you want to
Oh, yes.
on the phone?
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to just mention that recently Northwell Health and New York State is offering testing in churches to various churches in our area. And I was wondering if that would be something that you might be interested in participating in. I'm not as affiliated with them, but as far as giving out free masks even, or hand sanitizers, it's very expensive, those items in general. And I just wanted to throw that out. I don't know if everyone was aware of that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
I think if anybody's giving out free hand sanitizer and masks, we'll be looking into that when we're ready to open up, so we have them on board, on deck for when we need them. I really appreciate everybody's participation tonight. It has been wonderful to see you all and to actually see your faces. I asked Griffin to take us out with the closing prayer, so I will give him the second to last word, and Father Kelly, you can have the last word.
Wow.
So Griffin, go for it.
This will be made up on the spot. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Loving God, thank you for this opportunity to be together, for us to share how our lives have been going, for us to talk about the pain and the difficulty of our distance from one another, but also for the ability to express the sense of hope that we will one day be together again. Thank you for the hunger for justice that you've given us. Thank you for the ways that you're at work in our lives and in us as one body. We ask that you help our desires come to the fore. We ask for a spirit of discernment as we begin thinking about what we might do to address these massive inequalities that the virus has revealed. We ask that you keep us strong in you, help us to remain connected to each other, and grace us with your presence, even though we're not together. Amen.
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 So I want to thank you all for coming out on a Wednesday night and sharing the time with us. It's been a tonic for my soul, seeing and hearing you all. It's been so good. I think it was Ginny at the beginning mentioned about the filming. We are going back to the church this week. We're filming tomorrow. And we've been able to, between Lydia and Dylan, figure out, we think, the audio and the visual. So you'll be able to see your church home again. But the dining room is also your church home, but the larger church home. So we invite you to that. This was very good for me because, you know, as I said, tomorrow will be the day we film Sunday's Mass. And I just gotten some stuff ready for the bulletin today to be sent. And Laudato Si was very much on my mind and in my column, and it's going to be in my homily tomorrow. So, you know, continue to read it, propagate it, and I think this this Argentinian Pope of ours is helping to lead us in a good and healthy direction. And in spite of all sorts of contrary voices across the world, I think let's continue to listen to what he has to say, because it's a good and a solid gospel-based message. So I'm hopeful. So that's what I want to leave us with. I'm hopeful that out of the devastation, out of the sadness, will come resurrection. And we are an Easter people, and Alleluia is our song. Amen. Thank you again.
Amen.
Okay?
Amen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.